everyone, welcome back to Math Tutoring. Today's lesson is on solving linear inequalities. So when you're solving inequalities, you're going to solve them the same way as you would solve an equation. However, instead of an equal sign, you're going to have either a greater than or less than sign or greater than or equal to, less than or equal to sign. So I'm going to start with an example. So let's solve the following for x, and let's start off with something like this. 3x over 5 is less than x minus 4 over 3. So when you're solving a linear inequality, you're just going to solve it as if this is an equation. So imagine that this is an equation, and just remember how you would solve this if it were an equation. However, instead of having an equal sign, you're going to carry the equality down. So the first thing I think about here is I could do cross multiplication. I could probably not cross multiplication, because we're going to imagine that it's an equal sign. So imagining there's an equal sign here, the first thing I would do is try to get rid of the denominators. So I would probably multiply both sides of the equation by 15. So we're going to do that first. Okay, so when we do that, 15 divided by 5 is 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. Okay, now you're going to multiply this in. This becomes 5x minus 20. And now we're going to solve for x. So that becomes 4x is less than negative 20. So 9x minus 5x. And then dividing both sides of the equation by 4, we get x is less than negative 5. So solving it the same way as if we had an equal sign here, we just imagine it to be an equation, but of course it's not. So you end up with an inequality at the end. Okay? So that's that one. So, and it's the same thing for other examples. So say you have something like the following. So you have a greater than or equal to sign. Same thing, you just imagine it to be an equal to sign and think, how would you solve this equation if this were an equal to sign? And you know that you would just multiply both sides of the equation by 7 to eliminate that fraction first. And whatever you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other. So following the same rules as equations. This multiplies here and here when we open up the brackets. Then we bring all the x's to one side and all the numbers to the other side. So negative 1. And when we bring the number over, it still becomes a... Okay. When we bring the number over, it still becomes, it still changes sign. So if it's positive here, it becomes negative. So over here, when we bring the 1 over, it becomes a positive. So those rules are still the same. Now we get negative 22 is greater than or equal to, wait a minute, what am I doing here? Sorry, just going to go back. That should be 7x minus 5x. So negative 22 is greater than or equal to 2x Okay, and then if we divide both sides of the equation by positive 2, we get negative 11 is greater than or equal to x. So that would be our answer. Okay, so solving just like a regular equation. However, instead you've got this, instead of equal sign, you've got an inequality. So it's the same idea for every inequality. Something to keep in mind with inequalities, if you ever at the end divide your answer by a negative, I'll just show you what I'm talking about here. So say you have, you solve the question, and at the end you have negative 3x is greater than or equal to 5. And if you divide by a negative, you have to flip your inequalities. So that's very important to remember, okay? So when you divide by a negative, you have to flip the inequality in the other direction. So that's the only difference with inequalities. That's different than equations, because in equations, when you divide by negatives, you don't have to, obviously the equation doesn't flip, it just stays the equal to sign. But with inequalities, if you're ever dividing, this does not apply when you're dividing by positives. As you saw in the previous example, when I divided by a positive number, I did not flip the inequality. But when you're dividing by a negative number, you do have to, at the end, if you divide by negative, you have to flip the inequality. Okay, so it's little things like that that can get you the wrong solution or cause confusion when you're looking at the solution in the back of the textbook when you're doing questions and you realize, why is this thing flipped? Because maybe it was divided by a negative number. Okay, so things like that. So, but like I said, normally if you try to keep the variable positive, you won't have to worry about dividing by negatives. But again, sometimes you solve it in a way where you end up with a negative variable. Then when you're dividing by a negative, just remember to flip the inequality. Okay, so that is solving linear inequalities.